Today's episode is all about how to speak up, especially in tense moments. I don't know about you, but the way that I grew up is that you had to be polite, and that meant tolerating conversations that perhaps you might not want to. Sitting there at a party, and I will tell you that I posted this content on LinkedIn right before the holidays, and it was so popular. It got so many comments and got so much response that I thought, hey, why not do this for a regular episode? Because the truth is, these situational sentence prompt, sentence starters, things to say, especially when there's a tense or awkward situation, happen all the time. It's not just at the holidays. I originally did this post to help people with what to say, especially if you're tempted to stay silent. Instead, these are some things that I recommend that you say. Now, when I say tense moments or awkward moments, they don't have to be awkward moments. They don't have to be tense, but they could potentially go that way. And that is why I want to equip you with some phrases that will help you to speak up for yourself. And thinking about this, it might be a family gathering, it might be even a networking event where you get stuck with somebody and you're thinking, how do I get out of this? So, this is all about how to get out of those situations and speak up for yourself. It's ultimately an episode on boundaries, truthfully, because so much of this is about speaking up for what you need, what you want. And that is a huge part of boundaries and what that requires of us. And a lot of it is really just courage. Now, it's easy for me to say just courage, like no big deal. I totally understand how challenging it can be to employ your courage, especially in situations where you're not used to doing it. And I will tell you, in these moments over the years where I have spoken up for myself, each time, each micro moment, each low stakes situation where I've practiced has gotten easier and easier. And then you build that muscle memory so that it isn't so hard in a real situation that is truly one that you want to make sure that you can employ and ultimately protect yourself so you're not stuck there in tension or frankly just stuck there being hijacked by somebody you don't want to keep talking to. So here are my tips around this. I also want to remind you that you don't need to be louder and you don't need to explain yourself. You just need a few simple tools you can use in the moment. So I've got one, two, three, four, five, six. Yeah, six situations here that will help you to determine what you could say in these particular moments. Okay. First one, let's say you've got an over talker. That can happen to a lot of us, and especially as women, we were taught that you need to be polite, you need to be nice, you need to be kind. And a lot of that can be interpreted as, okay, now I have to sit and listen to this person. So, my number one piece of advice with this is to excuse yourself instead of tolerating an over talker. You could simply say, excuse me, and walk away. That is a complete sentence. You could, if you want more, here's a couple of thoughts. You could say, I'm going to grab a drink. Excuse me, I'm going to grab a drink. Or, excuse me, I'm going to mingle with some other guests. Or I'm going to mingle in the room here in front of us. Obviously, you've got to determine with common sense which of these applies to the situation that you're in. But keep in mind, I originally wrote these for being at a party, particularly with family, but it could be anybody, frankly. It really doesn't matter. These are all very much conversational tools in the moment. The other one is to interrupt with intention. This may feel a little bit awkward for some of you because it feels unnatural for us to interrupt people. We're not trained that that's okay. We didn't grow up with that being proper, if you want to put it that way. But when you interrupt with intention, it helps you to speak up for yourself. This isn't about being mean or hurtful. It's simply about being intentional. So, for example, here's what you could say. That's a unique perspective. Here's mine. You saying unique perspective isn't judgmental. It is definitely inclusive, but it also gives you space to share yours. I specifically recommend you say, here's mine, rather than what a lot of us do is, may I share mine? Now, it's not that there's anything terribly wrong with that one. I truly was even thinking, should I put that in there? But the reason why I recommend you say, here's mine, is that you're leading the conversation. You're basically saying, I'm done listening to what you've had to say. I want to share mine now. The other one, this is particularly with somebody that has been either talking a long time or perhaps it's just they're going on and on. I guess it's the same thing about a topic. You could say, I want to pause this for a moment. Notice how that's collaborative. It's not saying stop talking, you whatever. It's simply saying, I want to pause us. It breaks the pattern of the conversation. It breaks the pattern of the overtalker. And it is a great way to recalibrate and then be mindful of what to say next. So if you say, I want to pause this for a moment, then be ready with what you want to say next. So that could be as simple as, I appreciate the things that you're sharing. I'd like to share my perspective now. Or it could be simply, thank you for sharing your perspective. I'm going to go mingle with some of the other people in the room, or I'm going to use the bathroom, or I'm going to grab a drink, or it could just simply be, thanks for sharing your perspective. Have a wonderful evening. And you walk away. That may feel completely foreign to you, but it is actually perfectly acceptable. And you're being also very kind by doing that. The next one, this is our third, is lead with curiosity, not compliance. Keep in mind that a lot of us want to control situations. Let's face it, I can be a control freak. And there are times when I'm not to say that, yeah, we're going to move on from that one. Let's just say that I can have a tendency to control, like most of us in the world. And this is why remembering that somebody else's opinion does not have to comply with yours. So, one of the best ways that you can lead with curiosity is to say, tell me more. There's actually research around this related to emotional intelligence that when we say, tell me more in 3 rounds of the conversation, that is where the person feels most heard. Now, I want to bring this up that there's a time and a place. Do you want to be curious because you truly want to learn more? Or are you being curious simply because you are hoping to move the conversation along? So, this is always where it goes back to what is your intention? Because if your intention is not to hear more, don't say it don't more than once, frankly. But tell me more can be a way to lean in, make the person feel heard, and make sure that you understand, and then you can determine where to go from there. Another one is related to leading curiosity with curiosity, not compliance, is what makes you say that? Or what makes you say that? You want to have that with a light tone because usually when we say what makes you say that, it's something that we disagree or we perhaps are judging that other person. So remember to say that one very lightly with your also with a light facial expression in addition to voice. The other one is name your boundary briefly. You do not have to over explain. You do not have to go into great detail or justify yourself or try to make everything better and make them feel more comfortable. This is simply, I have 3 tips for you around this. One is simply, that doesn't work for me. As simple as that. It depends on the situation always, but that is a perfectly acceptable thing to say. That doesn't work for me. Or number 2, and this one is, I'm not available for that. And you can say it with a smile, but be clear. Here's what will work for me. That's a great one because it focuses on moving the conversation in a positive direction. It also says to the other person, I'm confident and I'm going to share what my perspective is. And in a way, without saying the words, it makes sure that they don't bulldoze over you or think that they can take advantage of your time or your ear. I do think that a lot of people have no clue that they are over talkers or they're not good listeners. I had somebody recently who is definitely not a good listener in my life say, I'm a good listener. I'm a good listener. And it was in a group setting, so I wasn't going to say anything. But I remember chuckling behind the scenes thinking, isn't it fascinating how people perceive themselves? And a lot of times there is this great disparity gap between how we think we're coming across versus how we actually are coming across. Now, at the right time or place, I might choose to say something to him. But for now, we'll continue the conversation. The fifth one here is to redirect the conversation. This is especially when something is going off the rails or you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to keep talking about this. Simply saying, let's change gears. And you say it with a smile on your face. That can be a nice signal to the person of, okay, she wants to move on. And maybe they don't even have a clue, but you're still voicing that you want to move forward and change the topic. The second one with this is I'd like to hear what others think. This is a great way to bring other people into the conversation to help you to not have to sit there and listen to that person the whole time. And it is a great way to be inclusive as well with other people in the conversation. So it accomplishes a multiple things. And then number 6 is to use silence as strength. A pause followed by, I see it differently, is powerful. I generally don't recommend saying flat out, I disagree. It depends on your personality. For me, that feels too strong and too almost argumentative. But saying it with things such as, I see it differently, I have another perspective. I'd like to share that. Or I have another perspective. Here's mine. It invites a more collaborative feel to the conversation, and it definitely shows that you're not judging outwardly. You might be inwardly. It happens to the best of us, but the more we can be neutral in a situation, the better relationships we're going to have, and probably the more peaceful conversations and the more fulfilling we're going to be. Well, let's see, maybe fulfilling isn't the right word, but ultimately you're going to have a better experience, because when we're argumentative, it generally doesn't lead to good things. People are mostly people are mostly trying to protect themselves. We are naturally on the defense. And especially if somebody criticizes us or makes a comment that feels like they are infringing upon our opinions or our beliefs. So let's just face it. It goes back to something, I don't know which psychologist said it first. I've heard it from Dr. Phil. I've heard it from Dr. Henry Cloud. But the whole idea of, do you want to be right or do you want the relationship? And I would recommend that you consider giving up being right for the relationship, even if it's not somebody that you love to hang around or be around. But we've got to remember that all of these things reflect back on you. At the end of the day, you may be right, but how you show up, how you behave, how you are being in the world is ultimately what people are going to think about you. It's the same example of where somebody might be a public figure and they're wronged, and then they come back with a vengeance or revenge, or they say awful things, and they might be right about the person, but unfortunately it reflects directly on them. So be a light, be the person that others love to be around, and remember that you have the right to set your own boundaries whenever you want. You don't have to tolerate things that you might have been taught that you need to tolerate, because every single one of us has the right to spend our time the way we want to spend our time. And if we're kind, remember that being clear is kind, as Brene Brown said so beautifully. And confidence, again, it isn't about being loud. It's about being clear. I'll say that again. Confidence isn't being loud. Confidence is being clear. And clarity is kindness to yourself and to others. You are allowed to take up space wherever you walk into. You deserve Well, my goodness, excuse me. Let me back up there. You are able to take up space wherever you go. So remember, you're worthy to take up space. You're deserving to take up space because you exist in this world. And I would highly recommend that you save some of these, write some of these down on your phone, have one or two of your favorites at the ready and practice them with people. Practice them. This is, by the way, what we do in my coaching as well as my group coaching and cohort, the Powerhouse. We practice these things because where else are you going to do that in life? Most of us are not going to practice on our own, which is why we hire coaches to help us. So consider working with me, reach out to me. I've got a few spots left for the Powerhouse. And it is so important to practice these things, especially when you're in senior leadership, because as a senior leader, there's very few places to go to practice these things in a safe environment. Because when we're the leader, everybody is looking up to us. I don't need to tell you this, but please remember that is so important. And ultimately, that you deserve to take up space. One favor I'd like to ask of you, if you haven't done it already and you enjoy this podcast, please review it on Amazon or wherever you consume content. It would mean the world to me, and it helps to make sure that more people are hearing the podcast, hearing the episodes, and getting the tips so that we can all have a more fulfilling and confident life. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.